IFRS 15, which I know na lahat tayo very excited tuwing nakakarinig ng standard. Diba? I'll tell you a short story first about language, communicating into different languages. So, is anybody here knows the story about the lost satellite back in 1998 or 1999, I think? Am I too old enough to? We don't want to. Para i-observe yung climate ng Mars. And then they sent the satellite out, and then after a few months, I think about around 10 months, in 1999, so they lost track of it. Okay, so hindi nila alam, they don't know where was the satellite back then. So they tried to calculate, to estimate, or to calculate where is it located. But they couldn't find it. So there were two teams actually trying to figure out where was the satellite. So these two teams are doing their own calculations, their mathematics or whatnot. So, and they couldn't come into same terms. Hindi sila magkasundo. And you know what was the error? A simple error. It's about the metrics. So one team was using what do you call this? The English metrics, and the other one is using the kilometers, meters. So yung isa nagka-calculate using miles, inches, feet, and the other one is using meters, millimeters or kilometers, whatever. So they forgot to convert one measurement to another. So hindi sila magkasundo. So just imagine the impact of that miscommunication, because there are two different languages, right? Another story is we all know the story about Nokia. I think lahat tayo dito nagkaroon ng Nokia cellphone. At least medyo matanda na ako kaya alam ko yun. But I never had a Nokia phone when I was a kid. So ingit na ingit ako sa kapatid ko nun kasi she has 3310. Una nagkaroon siya ng 5110, then after a few months binilan siya ng daddy ko ng 3310. So where's my phone? I didn't have one. So but that's not the story. So we knew that Nokia was the king of mobile phones back then, back in 90s. Almost everyone has Nokia phone. But then Apple came. 2007 they introduced iPhone. And that was the start of the end for Nokia. Start na sila mag-fall. And the reason of that is hindi sila nag-adapt quickly. They didn't adapt quickly to change. They were too proud of themselves that they know that they were the king of mobile phones and no one else in the industry could beat them. And when they realized that Apple was taking over the market, it was too late for them to change. So it is really important for everyone to adapt to changes. So going back to our topic, IFRS 15. So revenue standard between US GAAP and IFRS, they used to have two different standards. They account for revenue in two different ways. We know that US GAAP has a detailed guidelines on how to recognize revenue, while IFRS is more of a guidelines or more on a high level, wherein subject to interpretation. So meron ding difference in languages between FASB and ISB. So these two came together, and then they talked about converging their standards, or at least aligning key areas of revenue recognition between the two standards. So that is where IFRS 15 was born. So I'm not saying that we lose satellite because US GAAP and IFRS have two different standards. No, we're not going to lose any satellite. But just imagine the two financial statements applying two different standards. When you look at the financial statements, you won't be able to compare those two. So that is the solution that ISB and FASB came up to align their standards. And all companies using IFRS, they are required to apply this IFRS 15 by 2018. and all companies have to adapt this. So we'll discuss what you've probably missed in IFRS 15. So as I mentioned to you, I'm hoping that I'll be able to share with you the actual experiences that actual issues that we've encountered in the market, and I will not dig into the differences between IAS 18 and IFRS 15 because we're already over that phase. Now that we are required to implement it, we really have to know how to implement or adapt the requirements of this standard. So our agenda, I'll discuss the general guidelines of IFRS 15, some practical examples, industry-specific considerations, and the disclosures. Okay. Okay, so when we did our implementation, even in our impact assessment, some of our clients or a number of our clients actually asked us, why do we need to do the implementation, or why do we need to go through this process? Even if the actual results, okay, even if the actual results, the quantitative results of IFRS 15 is actually similar or not materially different from IAS 18. So the question is, why do we need to go through with this process? Well, basically, there will be a number of stakeholders will be asking you on what is the impact of IFRS 15. Are you sure that we are still in compliance with the new standards, with the new requirements? And you can always say, yes, we are in compliance, and there's no material impact in our books. But how can you say that without documenting or without assessing the impact or looking at the requirements of the standard? So all of us have to go through the thought process on how we came up with the conclusion. So even though the numbers will not be significantly different from IAS 18, we still have to go through the process, document it, because your stakeholders, for example, the senior management, the audit committee, external auditors will be asking for the document on how you assess the impact of IFRS 15 in your books. Okay. So there will be a lot of judgment areas that the management or the finance people has to take into consideration. They have to make a position, and those judgments, hopefully, I'll be able to discuss with you. Okay. So what we have learned during the implementation of IFRS 15. So these are the few areas that I want to discuss with you. First is, clients underestimate the impact of IFRS 15. Most of the clients that I've encountered, that I have discussed with, they always tell us that, no, there's no impact. No, nothing at all. Walang impact. Walang pagbabago sa gagawin natin. And that is when you underestimate the impact of IFRS 15 and magiging unprepared sila. So that is one thing. Another is nobody has read the terms and conditions of their contracts with customers. This is really important when it comes to IFRS 15. Yung title pa lang ng IFRS 15, Revenue from Contracts with Customers. So we really need to know what are the provisions, what are the promises that we have included in our contract, and that will impact your implementation of IFRS 15. So another thing is, this one honestly, I haven't, very few impact, or very few entities I have encountered that you may no longer continue the use of percentage of completion method. To be honest, mostly, halos lahat ng companies na gumagamit ng percentage of completion, they still continue using percentage of completion. But there are few entities that are not required, or may no longer required to use percentage of completion. And revenues and costs do not match anymore. So if you will read the standard, they don't focus now on matching principle. It's about, the revenue recognition is about when do you perform your obligation to your customers. And the cost is basically either you capitalize it or you expend it as you incur. Okay. So let's talk about the revenue recognition model, which is the famous 5-step model. Alam ko lahat kayo alam na to. So let's just go through with the 5-step model. First is identify the contract. Identifying the contract basically means that this is where we determine whether the contract is within the scope of IFRS 15. So there are certain criteria that IFRS 15 has laid down in order to determine whether the contract is within the scope of IFRS 15. That we will discuss in detail later in the following slides. After identifying the contract, the second step is to identify the performance obligations in the contract. So this is one of the critical areas in IFRS 15. So some of the companies actually, they used to account for revenue as a one performance obligation. There's only one unit of account. But when IFRS 15 came, nalaman namin na the unit of account is not single performance obligation, but rather we also have some promises in the contract that should be treated as a separate performance obligation. So that is one of the key areas. After identifying the performance obligations, the step 3 is to determine the transaction price. Dito papasok yung other elements of the contract. So there will be some elements in the contract that will result to a variable consideration or any consideration payable to your customer, and kahit ano pa. Tapos basically IFRS 15 gave us a guidance on how to account for these elements in the contract, and that should be taken into consideration when identifying or determining the transaction price. The fourth step is to allocate the transaction price that we have determined in step 3 to the performance obligations that we have identified in step 2. So this is relevant if you determine that your performance obligation is more than one. Kung isa lang yung performance obligation nyo, well, this is not a problem. So you just have to allocate the whole transaction price to your performance obligation. But if you have multiple performance obligations, then you have to allocate this transaction price into different performance obligations. And how to allocate it, we will discuss it later in detail. And finally, recognize revenue, either point in time or over the period of time. And now the focus of standard is, again, as I mentioned earlier, the focus is to when do you actually fulfill your obligations to your customers. Now, we have moved away from the risk and rewards guidance under IAS 18, but now we are focusing on the transferring or fulfilling the obligations to our customers. So, let's discuss identifying the contract, step 1. So, the most common question that we receive from our client is, what is our contract? So, because tuwing sinasabi mo yung contract, they will always look for a 30-pager document, 10-pager document, or whatever. But not all companies or not all entities will have this type of contracts. Actually, contracts can be oral, written, or it depends on the business practice of your company. So these are basically the requirements or the criteria under IFRS 15. The collection of consideration is probable. Rights to goods and services and payment terms can be identified. It has commercial substance and it is approved by both parties. Let's take a quick example. So, just a normal retail company or a normal marketing company. So, what happens is the customer will basically send you a purchase order, the normal process. Makaka-receive kayo ng purchase order from the customer. And then after that, your company will issue a quotation and mag-agree kayo sa price and then sa materials also, sa goods na ipoprovide or services na ipoprovide nyo sa kanila. So once you agree with the price and the services or goods that they will provide to the customer, masasatisfy nyo na doon. And this one. Now, after, if the customer is a regular customer, meron na yung record sa company, so ma-assess na rin ng company if the collection of consideration is considered probable. If it is a new client or new customer, usually there is a KYC process where know your client. So, which you will basically assess whether they have the ability to pay you. Right? And then it has commercial substance, of course. A normal business transaction will always have a commercial substance most of the time. So even if we don't have that 30-pager contract, 30-pager document, that business practice constitutes a contract. So that is where you're going to assess whether the transaction is within IFRS 15 or not. So what if merong isa rito na hindi natin na-achieve? So what will happen? So generally, it will not fall under IFRS 15. So any consideration na ma-receive from customer will be recorded as liability until the proper time to recognize it as a revenue or other accounts will be determined. So, but and if it falls under IFRS 15, then we need to go through the 5-step model. Okay. So that's for step 1. For step 2, is identifying the performance obligation in the contract. So first step, sub-step under step 2 is to basically, what are the promises under the contract? So when we say promises under the contract, these are the specific items or elements in the contract that we promise to give to the customers. It could be a service, could be a product, it could be a shipping services or delivery services. So those items have to be identified in the contract before you assess whether it satisfies the criteria of step 2. So you have to list down all the promises that you give to the customer. So let's say for example na meron kang 4 na na-identify na elements or promises in the contract. Let's say you'll provide some service, you'll provide some product, you'll provide warranty, and you'll provide also delivery services. So that is when you need to assess using these 2 criteria. Okay, discuss natin yung criteria in detail. So first criteria is, can the customer benefit from the good or service either on its own or together with other resources that are readily available to the customer? And the second is the promise to transfer the good or service separately identifiable from the other promises in the contract? Kailangan, we need to meet both of the following, both criteria, in order to conclude that the good or service is a separate performance obligation. Again, medyo, if you will read it literally, medyo nakakalito siya, to be honest. First, let me emphasize na what is performance obligation. Performance obligation is your unit of account under IFRS 15. This is actually yung, the item that you will recognize as a revenue under IFRS 15. So it is important to identify or at least determine whether you have multiple performance obligation or single performance obligation. Because one performance obligation, let's say performance obligation 1 can be recognized immediately, and the performance obligation number 2 could be recognized or deferred or recognized over time. So this is very important area. So I'll give you my way of understanding or remembering these 2 criteria. Basically, criteria 1 is literally you can actually separately identify what is the product 1, product 2, and service 1, service 2. So literally, you can identify it separately. For example, bumili ka ng entertainment package from Sony. You receive the television, PlayStation, home theater, and soundbar. I can specifically identify nasan yung TV. Siguro naman lahat tayo alam natin kung ano yung TV. We can specifically identify PlayStation, and so on and so forth. So literally, I can identify what are those items in the package. So that is criteria number 1. So criteria number 2, this is where the what we call it contextually, in the context of contract. Is it really separable? So literally and contextually, is it really separable? So the standard actually gave us 3 indicators to determine whether, in the context of contract, whether it's really separable. So the first indicator is, does the entity does not provide significant integration of goods or services to represent a combined output for which you are contracted. In other words, so basically, is there meron bang integration nitong goods and services na to para mag-produce into one combined output? Okay. Ang palatandaan ko dito is kare-kare. Kasi para sa akin, mahirap lutuin yung kare-kare. So there's a significant integration of different ingredients. So, alam mo merong tuwalya, merong beef, merong pechay, peanut butter, and kung ano pa, baka magkamali natin. Papanggap lang marunong magluto. So, I can identify separately the ingredients. Pero, kunwari si John, nangingi sa akin, Paolo, pagluto mo naman ako ng kare-kare. Hindi ko ibibigay sa kanya separately yung pechay, peanut butter, o kung ano pa man, aswete. Meron aswete. So, hindi ko bibigay separately yun. I have to integrate these goods, these ingredients into one combined product, which is the kare-kare, which is the item or the product that John asked me to do or asked me to prepare. So that is one of the indicators. So if merong significant integration to produce one product, meaning it's a single performance obligation, or you don't meet the second criteria. Okay. So second indicator that the standard provided to us is does not significantly modify or customize another good or service in the contract. Again, does not significantly modify or customize another good or service promised in the contract. So, ang example ko dito is preparing a coffee. Kape. So, meron kang coffee, you have a creamer, sugar, and hot water. At least alam ko hindi mahirap magtimpla ng kape. Siguro yung lasa mag-iba. But you just need to combine everything. No significant integration. But once you combine everything, yung ingredients hindi nyo na maiiwalay. It's because each ingredients actually modify each other, which again produces another single product. So, one ingredient or one product will basically modify another one, or one service will basically modify another product. So that is the second criteria. If it significantly modifies another product, then it's considered as a single performance obligation, or you won't meet the second criteria. Okay. And the third indicator is basically not highly dependent. Not highly dependent or highly interrelated with other goods or services promised in the contract. So, hindi sila dependent to each other. So, ang example ko naman dito is a drone. So, if you buy a drone, the drone, yung box ng drone, sabihin sa'yo the items included in the box. So, you will have the drone with the 20 megapixel camera, HD camera, and then the remote control. So, let's say for example, yung drone itself at saka yung remote control. You won't be able to use the drone without the remote control. And you won't be able to use the remote control without the drone. So highly interrelated. Hindi mo sila pinagsasama. There's no significant integration. Hindi niya na modify. The remote control does not modify the drone significantly because drone is still a drone even if you use the remote control. But they are highly interrelated. They are dependent to each other. So that's how I actually try to remember the three indicators under IFRS 15. So, okay, so those are very like the day-to-day examples or the way I try to remember this criteria. But if we're going to so Okay. So bigyan ko rin again two examples about separating performance obligation. Let's say company A. Company A is a construction company. Okay. So you entered into a contract with company A to build a house on your land. Okay. So let's try to assess whether the contract basically satisfies criteria 1 and criteria 2. So under the contract, it says that company A will basically provide the materials, the hollow blocks, wood, and etc. And they will also provide the construction services. So let's say we've identified materials and the construction services as two promises in the contract. So let's assess. Criteria 1. Can you literally segregate or identify the promises? Yes, you know what are the materials, and you know that there's a construction service that they will be providing to you. Now we meet the criteria 1. So second criteria, the kare-kare indicator. So is there a significant integration of the materials and construction services to produce one combined output? Yes, because the combined output is the house, right? So na-meet na rin natin yung criteria number 2. So it means that there's only one or single performance obligation in the contract, and that is to build the house on your land. That's company A. Let's talk about company B. Company B is a telecom company. Okay, let's say for example Etisalat. Bumili kayo ng phone kay Etisalat at nag-enter kayo into contract for 2 years. Let's say iPhone. You bought an iPhone from Etisalat and then you entered into a 2-year contract. So you receive the phone and the SIM card, which is the network service. Again, criteria number 1, na-meet ba natin? Yes, kasi nandyan yung phone. Alam natin yung phone, alam natin yung SIM card. Kare-kare example. So, meron ba significant integration? Meron bang combined output? Walang significant integration because a phone is still a phone even if you insert the SIM card. And SIM card yun pa rin. Meron ka pa rin phone na pwede mo magamit other than connecting to the network. Right? And the network will still be the network service. So, hindi natin na-meet yung first indicator. Second indicator, which is the kape. Again, nabago ba yung phone nung in-insert natin yung SIM card? No. Yung SIM card nandun pa rin, hindi naman siya natunaw sa loob ng phone. So, hindi natin na-meet yung second criteria. How about the third criteria, the drone example? Na-meet ba natin? Sure? No. Good answer. So, actually, hindi natin siya na-meet. Why? Because, first is, ano nga yung example natin sa drone? Yung phone natin, iPhone, magagamit niyo pa rin siya even without the SIM card.
Yes.
Yes. And you can actually acquire SIM card from another network. SIM card, if hindi nabenta sa inyo yung number na 055 something, they can still sell it to another customer. So, even the third criteria, we're not able to meet it. So, again, 3 criteria, we were able to meet it. So, criteria 2 is met. So now, for the telecom example, for company B, we have 2 separate performance obligations. One is the provision of phone, and then the service. So, I hope medyo clear naman tayo pagdating sa performance obligation. Okay. So, that's step 2. Now, let's go to step 3, which is determining the transaction price. Okay, so what is transaction price is basically the combination of your fixed consideration and any variable or any future consideration that you will receive from the customer. There are four items that you have to consider in transaction price aside from your fixed price. First is the variable consideration. Second is any consideration payable to a customer. Third is non-cash consideration received from the customer. And then, significant financing component. let's first talk about ang consideration payable to a customer. So, generally, any consideration na na-receive natin from customer is reduced from your transaction price. Let's say, nakabenta ka ng 100 dirhams, but naka-receive ka ng 10K customer, then you will deduct it directly from your revenue. So, you'll recognize only 90 as your revenue. Okay. So, but first, you have to determine whether that what do you call this? That consideration payable to customer is a consideration for a distinct good or service. So what does it mean? For example, I'll give an example. A manufacturer and a retailer. Okay. So the retailer agreed to sell the manufacturer's product, but because the product is special, requires specialized equipment, and may requirement na kailangan gawin sa store ni retailer. So manufacturer agreed to pay retailer a certain amount para dun sa equipment na yun at saka para dun sa gagawing construction or revision dun sa store nila. So, two scenario. So, first scenario is yung equipment na bibilin ni retailer para pagbenta dun sa product ni manufacturer is owned by the retailer. Okay, sila yung may-ari. If ma-terminate man yung contract na with manufacturer, siya yung magre-retain ng equipment. Hindi niya kailangan ibigay kay manufacturer. So in that case, the consideration paid by the manufacturer to the retailer is a reduction to the transaction price. Okay, because hindi niya nire-represent yun as payment for the equipment. Because the equipment is basically owned by the retailer. But second scenario, if the retailer is required to give the equipment to the manufacturer, in case na terminate kunwari, at required sila na basically ibigay yung equipment kay manufacturer, because under the contract it says that kami may-ari ng equipment na yan, even ikaw ang bili. So in that case, there is a distinct good or service na kailangan mong i-recognize o kailangan ni manufacturer na i-recognize. So, hindi siya i-deduct directly from revenue. So, actually, the payment or the consideration paid to the customer is in consideration for the equipment bought by the customer on behalf of the manufacturer. So, how do we treat this one? So, first is you have to estimate the fair value of that equipment. So, and then compare that with the consideration you pay to the retailer. So, in case na equal lang or less than yung binayad mo kay retailer, it means that yung buong amount na binayad mo kay retailer is for the payment of the equipment. So, hindi mo dapat i-adjust yung transaction price mo. Kasi yung consideration na binayad mo sa kanya is for the equipment, solely for the equipment. But what if the consideration you pay to the retailer is higher than the fair value of the equipment? So what will happen is the excess between the fair value of the equipment and the consideration paid to the retailer will be reduced from your transaction price. Okay, so yung fair value, let's say for example, you paid 120 dirhams, and the fair value of the equipment is 100. So the 100 is basically payment for the equipment, and 20 is a reduction from your transaction price or from your revenue basically. Sorry. So that is consideration payable to the customer. So non-cash consideration is example, trade-in. So pumunta kay HRFDG, gusto mo ng Galaxy S10 Plus. Binigay mo yung iPhone mo. So si HRFDG yung gagawin niya, may measure niya yung fair value ng second hand na iPhone. And then sabihin niya sa'yo, dagdag ka ng 2,000 dirhams, bigay ko sa'yo S10 Plus. So, yun na yun. Kailangan lang si HRFDG, they just need to measure the fair value of the non-cash consideration. Okay, let's talk about variable consideration. So what is variable consideration? A variable consideration is any terms in the contract that would impact your transaction price, which depends on any future events. Okay. So examples are discounts, liquidated damages, performance bonuses, penalties on products or service performance. Liquidated damages, ito yung mga any payments na kailangan mong ibayad kay customer in case of breach of contract, or the other way around, na marireceive mo kay customer in case of breach of contract. So, going back to IAS 18, so discuss ko kanina, wala sa mga sa mga clients namin na binasa talaga yung terms and conditions of the contract. And they didn't know that they have to take this in consideration when it comes to calculating or estimating the transaction price. So now in IFRS 15, they have to basically read the contract and see whether they have this type of provision in their contract. And that has to be taken into consideration. Performance bonuses, example, if you were able to meet the deadline or before the deadline, the customer will pay you additional bonus or additional money. So that you also have to take into consideration. So actually, identifying the variable consideration is the easy part of determining the transaction price. The question that we always receive from the clients is, how do we measure or estimate the variable consideration? So again, is the consideration variable or fixed? If it is variable, there are two ways to estimate it. One is expected value or most likely amount. So expected value is basically wherein we calculate the probability weighted average of that event happening in the future. And then we'll estimate the variable consideration based on that weighted average probability. And then most likely amount, we'll discuss it later. I will give you an example para mas clear kung ano yung difference between the two. And then after determining which of these two are more appropriate, which of these two methods, determine the portion of that amount for which it is highly probable that significant revenue reversal will not subsequently occur. This is what we call the constraint. So this is where we include our qualitative assessment. So based on company's experience, kung ano ba talaga, nangyayari ba talaga ito sa future. So, and then once we determine what is the variable consideration, we will include that in the transaction price. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Estimating the variable consideration. So, my contract to build a jet. Okay. Fixed amount, 1,000 dirhams. Pero hindi ganyan kamura mag-build ng jet. Sana daan ko ng jet. Kung makompleto nyo yung, kung mabubuo nyo yung jet within the deadline, then bibigyan niya kayo ng 100 dirhams. If not, then wala kayong 100 dirhams. Performance bonus, let's say for example na under the contract, kung meron kayong cost savings sa paggawa ng jet, babayaran kayo ni customer ng 20% ng savings niyo. Okay, let's say yun yung nakalagay sa kontrata. So how would you estimate the transaction price? Fixed amount, it is not a variable, so you will directly include it in your transaction price. Completion bonus, you have two scenarios here. One is you meet the deadline or not. If you meet the deadline, you'll receive 100. If not, then wala kayong ma-receive. So you'll use most likely amount. Okay. So it's only either you'll include 100 in your transaction price or not. So you have to make that assessment whether this is probable. And then performance bonus, you'll use the expected value because you have range of possibilities. Depending on your estimate how much will the kung may makasasave kayong cost. So there are a range of possible possibilities. In that case, then you need to basically determine what is the probability of this cost saving. For example, 100,000 cost savings, or 50,000 cost savings, 25,000 cost savings, or no cost savings at all. So you determine what is the probability of each of these scenarios, and then calculate how much you will basically receive from the customer. Okay. So this is not a free choice. So basically, you have to determine what is more appropriate in your case. So that's for variable consideration. Now, significant financing component. anak nila mo. So, key things that we have to remember for significant financing component. Transaction price compared to cash selling price. So, if there is kung installment sales to, if you compare the total amount receivable from your customer against the cash selling price, and if there is a difference between the two, then most likely there's a significant financing component. If the period between cash payment or cash collection against the performance of the obligation, if merong difference between timings, then most probably there's a significant financing component. And any other terms in the contract that could result to significant financing component, like charging interest income. So, the most common question, again, what is the discount rate na dapat gamitin? So, normally, ito yung definition ng standard, but it is really difficult to understand it as it is. So, but what we usually do in practice is basically we ask the customers to inquire from their banks kung magkano yung i-charge ng interest sa kanila if they enter into a loan for with this amount. So, minsan mag-reply yung banko, then kung ano man yung i-reply, kung ano man yung ibigay na interest rate ng banko, that is the interest rate that they will use to calculate the significant financing component. And practical expedient, if the timing difference is within 12 months, then you don't have to calculate the significant financing component. Example, okay, T0 is your performance of your fulfillment of your obligation. Okay, let's say na na-receive mo yung cash within 12 months before mo ma-perform yung obligation mo, or even within 12 months after mo ma-fulfill yung obligation mo. As a practical expedient, no need to adjust your transaction price. But what if you receive payment in advance more than 12 months before mo perform your obligation mo? Then you have to calculate the significant financing component. Again, if ma-receive mo lang yung cash more than 12 months after mo ma-perform yung service or mabigay yung goods, then you also have to calculate the significant financing component. Okay. So now, na-identify na natin yung performance obligations, and we also identified the transaction price. Then we need to allocate the transaction price to these performance obligations. So in our example, company A and company B. Company A, we have determined that they only have single performance obligation. So walang problema. Kung ano man yung na-determine nating transaction price, then we will just allocate it to that performance obligation. Company B, we have identified the performance obligation. So this is relevant for company B because we need to allocate the transaction price between these two obligations. So the question is how to allocate. First is, meron ba standalone prices? Meaning, do we have a price for the phone and for the network if it is sold separately? Then, if meron, then basically you will allocate the transaction price based on the standalone prices. If wala, merong three approaches. One is adjusted market assessment approach. Basically, you will look at the market. So, for example, tingnan mo si Du, o kaya tingnan mo si Sharap DG, magkano nila binibenta yung phone, yung iPhone. Or tingnan mo si Du, kung magkano ba yung sinacharge niya sa customer niya for the network service. Then you'll use those prices to allocate the transaction price. Expected cost plus a margin approach. So, for example, internally, you have a policy na dapat meron kayong margin na 20% over your services or your goods. So, you know what is your cost for the phone and you know what is the cost for your service. Papatungan mo lang siya ng 20%, then that will be your basis for allocation. And residual approach, this is only in limited circumstances wherein hindi mo kayang gamitin yung adjusted market approach and expected cost plus margin. So basically, if one of the promises in the or performance obligation, alam mo yung price, and then the residual will be allocated to the other performance obligation. Okay. So, walang fair market, fair value measurement na required. Okay. So, now, na-allocate na natin yung transaction price to performance obligations. So, over time or point in time. So, again, to emphasize, the focus now is transfer or fulfilling the obligations to your customers. That is when you actually recognize the revenue. So, These are the requirements or the criteria in order to determine whether the revenue should be recognized over time. Okay. First is customer simultaneously receives and consumes the benefits as the entity performs. Second, the customer controls the asset as the entity creates or enhances it. And, medyo pagod na ako. Explain ko na lang sa inyo. Kasi actually, the first time that I saw this criteria also, it was difficult for me to understand. It's a bit confusing. Okay, for the first criteria, the key thing that you have to remember is, what if you terminate yung contract? Okay. So, for example, let's take construction, a company A as the example. Okay. So, they are in progress building your house. So, let's say it's a two-story house and nagawa na nila 60% ng bahay niyo. And for some reason, hindi mo gusto yung company A. So, you terminated the contract. So, are you basically required, for example, you terminated the contract and then you ask a third party to basically try to continue the construction. So, ang assessment mo is the third party required to re-perform the work done by company A? So, no. Hindi nila kailangang i-demolish yung construction, yung work done nila, and then again, build from scratch. So, that is example number 1. Company B, for criteria number 1. For example, terminate mo rin yung contract with Etisalat, pumunta kay A2. So, after 6 months. So, nung pumunta kay A2 after 6 months, si Do ba kailangan ba niya i-provide yung network service for the past 6 months? Hindi na. Because that is already service that has been provided by Etisalat. So, it means that customer simultaneously receives and consumes the benefits as the entity performs. So, because nag-benefit ka na dun sa work performed ng company. Okay, that's second is the customers control the asset as the entity creates or enhances it. Again, company A, construction, you own the land and they're building the house on your land. So, ina-enhance niya yung asset na owned mo na pag-aari mo na. So, it means that nakasatisfy mo tong second criteria. For company B, na-enhance ba niya yung phone mo, yung network service? Actually, your phone is still a phone. Your iPhone is still an iPhone even if connected to sa Etisalat network. So, hindi niya na-meet to. Okay. And third criteria, entity's performance does not create an asset for which an entity has alternate use. So, ang example natin dito is again, company A, pag nakompleto na niya, once the house is completed, has been completed by company A, this company A has the right or option or right to sell the house. Wala, kasi nakatayo yun sa land mo. So they don't have that right or that right to sell the house. Because does not create an asset for which an entity has an alternate use. So alternate use meaning paano sila mag-benefit aside from getting consideration from you. So it's either they will sell it to another customer, but they can't do that. So company A will not be able to satisfy this. Company B, yes, they may be able to. So they actually provide to other customers. They provide network service to other customers. So they do satisfy this. So, so in that case, the construction of your house for company A should be recognized over time. The network survey should be recognized over time as well. Okay. So, but how about the phone? So there is a control guidance under IFRS 15. So I will just like to emphasize risk and awareness of ownership. So initially in IS 18, basically this is the focus or the key area to determine when to recognize the revenue. But right now in IFRS 15, it is just one of the factors that you have to consider in determining whether the control is transferred or not. Okay, so let's go through some specific issues that we have encountered. So for a real estate developer, one of it is, again, this is just a reminder of the 3 criteria to determine whether it's a point in time or over time. Now, let's focus on enforceable right to payment. So what does it mean? So, fact pattern, developer D and customer C enter into a binding contract to sell the real estate unit. C, developer D retains legal title of the asset, and C, if default, pag nag-default si C, D is required to basically sell the asset to other parties, and the customer or customer C is liable to some extent. Issues, how to assess enforceability. Again, enforceability is a requirement of the 3rd criteria under overtime. Okay? Sorry. Under this one, under the 3rd criteria. So the issue here is how to assess enforceability, and what are the rights or construction rights of customer during the construction. And actually, the conclusion will depend on the fact pattern. So this is not a standard conclusion or standard answer to the question. So this is the scenario. If D sells the apartment to another customer for more than the original price, then D keeps the resale proceeds. So C liabilities will be extinguished. Now, pag nabenta naman ni D yung apartment pero mas maliit siya kaysa sa original selling price, then C will pay the difference between the original selling price and the fair market value. And then, if hindi niya magbibenta, then C remains liable for the original price. So the question here is, does D have an enforceable right to payment such D can recognize revenue over time? So in this case, yes, it is possible that D has enforceable right to payment, because in case of D not able to sell it to another party, C will still be liable. Okay, but if we cross this out, the 3rd one, okay, our interpretations committee, actually the International Financial Reporting Interpretations Committee, IFRS, actually issued a clarification regarding this. So it is important to understand that C's obligation should be part of the original contract. Okay, so in this case, C's obligation to pay the shortfall to the developer D is actually not part of the original contract. It is part of the subsequent sale contract. So in that case, in that particular fact pattern, IFRS says that it means that they are not able to meet the enforceable right criteria. Okay. So there's no constant or there's no single answer to any questions. So it depends on the fact pattern. Okay. So I think medyo running out of time na tayo. So I will just touch upon the detailed issues. Okay. So again, determining the performance obligations. So just to remind you, we have 2 criteria, right? So what are the areas or what are the key impacts that we have encountered? So if there are any customer options, warranties, shipping and handling, installations. Specifically for this one, I want to share with you. So this is very common, especially for companies which regularly exports their products, right? Because this is where you need to identify when is the control over the goods is transferred. So there are instances where it depends on the Incoterms of the contract. So you have to determine na-transfer na ba yung control when the company delivered the goods sa port, or pag na-reach na ba niya yung customer destination, yung destination of customer. So that is where the judgment area that you have to look at. So one example maybe I can give you is the CFR Incoterms. So CFR means that the customer will shoulder the insurance cost, right? So By the time na-deliver na ni exporter yung goods sa port, port of load, na-transfer na yung risk and rewards kay customer because yung si customer yung nag-shoulder ng insurance. So in that case, meaning, na-transfer na yung goods. So, pero meron pa rin silang obligation to deliver that goods to the customer. So in this case, meron silang 2 performance obligations instead of 1. So meron silang delivery of shipping services or delivery service and the actual goods. Okay. Customer options. Warranties. Okay, warranties. I think this one also. So warranties. There are 2 types of warranties under IFRS 15. That is the assurance warranty and the service warranty. So what is the difference between the 2? So assurance warranty, ito yung halimbawa, bumili ka ng light bulb. Sinabi na magagamit ito within 1 year. So hindi siya mapupundi within 1 year. So that is an assurance warranty. Assurance na magko-comply lang siya dun sa quality na pinrovide niyo. So in that case, it is not a separate performance obligation because ginagaranti ko lang na yung quality nito is within what I have advertised. But for example, if binenta ka nila, but if mapundi ito even after 1 year, pwede pa namin itong i-replace. Pero kailangan mo akong bayaran. So that is what we call service warranty, and that is a separate performance obligation. Okay. So variable consideration. Okay, so we try to determine. So breakage, I think breakage wala naman masyado nagbago from IAS 18, but just to refresh you, for example, gift cards. So you have to determine or estimate how much yung hindi ma-claim ng bumili ng gift card. And then, if it is unlikely na yung gift card is may exercise or ma-claim, then you can recognize the revenue on day 1. Or every reporting period, you have to assess and then recognize the revenue. Okay, significant financing component, I think we're clear about that. Construction, I think we've covered the construction issues during our examples. So, this is all. So, contract cost, 2 issues only. You just have to identify whether the contract cost should be capitalized or expensed as incurred. So first thing is you have to first determine whether it is under other standards. For example, IS2 which is inventories, IS16 PPE, 38 which is intangible. So if it is within these standards, then apply or capitalize it based on the requirements of these standards. If not, then apply IFRS 15. So what is the requirement of IFRS 15? Would cost be incurred regardless of whether contract is obtained. So, nakadepende ba yun sa pag-obtain mo, pag-acquire mo ng contract? If no, then incremental cost expected ba siya para na ma-recover? If yes, then capitalize it. If no, expense as incurred. Okay. If would cost be incurred regardless of whether contract is obtained or not? So, if yes, do they meet the criteria to be capitalized as fulfillment cost? Fulfillment cost is this slide, okay? And then if no, then you have to expense it as incurred. Then if it is a fulfillment cost, then it should be capitalized. Quickly, examples of fulfillment cost. These are the examples: direct labor, direct materials, allocated costs, and so on and so forth. Costs to be expensed as incurred. I think this is very similar to our old standard. Okay. So, principal versus agent. Only one change actually. This is very similar to IAS 18. That is the changes. Now the credit risk is not required to be considered when determining whether you are an agent or principal. Under IAS 18, actually, you have to consider credit risk, whether the credit risk is transferred to the agent or to the middleman or not. Okay, but right now, credit risk is not required. So it's only who has the discretion to establish prices, who has the inventory risk, and the primary responsible for delivering the services or goods. Again, just to recap, we have 3 parties here. One is the supplier or the main contractor, middleman, and the customers. So if the control is transferred directly to the customer, then the middleman is an agent. If the control passes through the middleman, then it means that the middleman is a principal to the main customer.
question.
Hmm.
I have a question, bro. So when you make this assessment, do you look at it at the viewpoint of the customer, or at the viewpoint of the middleman, and the seller?
You have to look at it from the viewpoint of the middleman. So,
Okay.
from the viewpoint of the middleman, so we'll determine what is the goods or service. For example, travel agency. Ito, madali lang na example ko. So, i-assess mo, so sino ba talagang primary responsible? Is it sa pagbigay ng ticket sa mga customers? Or sa pag-provide ng service? For example, nag-book ka kay Skyscanner. That's for example. So, titingnan mo, si Skyscanner ba yung mismo nagpo-provide ng service? No. Yung airline, right? So, you have to look at from the perspective of the middleman. Whether they have whether they are the primary responsible for delivering the goods or services to the main customer, or if they are they have the inventory risk. Again, they don't have the inventory risk. They just book the flights for you, but they don't have the inventory risk. Any question? So actually, whenever you assess principal versus agent, you're actually determining whether you are actually the middleman as an agent or middleman as a principal. So you are still looking at whether you are a principal or an agent, regardless whether you are a middleman or the main supplier. Disclosures, just quick reminder, don't overlook disclosures. There are additional information that has to be disclosed. One important thing, quantitative disclosures, you have to disaggregate your revenue depending whether it's recognized over time or reporting time. That has to be disclosed in your financial statements. And these significant judgments that you have made during the implementation. So, for example, for step 1, the collectability, you have to disclose how you make the judgment, identifying the performance obligation, whether how did you determine that is a separate performance obligation, or how do you determine that it is single performance obligation. Again, transaction price, kung meron kayong mga variable consideration, how you basically calculated the variable consideration. Allocate transaction price, what is the method of allocation, you have to disclose it in your financial statements. And of course, last but not the least, you have to mention how you satisfy the overtime criteria or how you satisfy the point-in-time criteria. So, key pointers, just to remind you, if you have already done this, you have to make sure that you already assess or perform this. Okay, so I think we have a Q&A after this one, but before we go to the Q&A, just want to share with you one of my favorite quotes. When given the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. Thank you.